Welcome to meeting number 3. It's really exciting to be with you all here this morning. As I'm looking at the comments, I see people all over the world. India, I know, let's see here, Italy, and I think, maybe, I think Ukraine as well. So feel free to drop where you're from in the comments. I always enjoy seeing that. But this morning, what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to do something a little different. Let's go through a overview. Each one of you, feel free to drop in the comments, how is your studying going? And at the end, I hope to be able to take some time and maybe answer some questions. You know, if you have study-related questions, I'd be happy to talk about that. But feel free to drop in the comments how's the study going, maybe what you're working on right now in your progress toward achieving this Magento certification. All right, very good. So we'll be seeing that. Okay, yep, Ukraine, wonderful. It's good to have you on here as well. While you are responding to my query there, and again, just how is the studying going? How is where are you studying? What certification you're going for as well. Okay, excellent. Good to see all of you here. Just a quick overview of how everything is going for me. I ended up taking a week off just because I'm sure a lot of you saw that my wife and I had a baby. It was actually almost exactly a week ago. It was like at 3:45 in the morning. So it was funny. Quick story. So I did a little talk for a Magento meetup in India, remotely here, just sitting at my desk. And it was at 11 o'clock my time at night, so it's a little bit late. So I went to bed, and my wife's contraction started. So you know how that stuff all goes. I didn't get much sleep, so I was very glad that this meeting was not last week. Let's just put it that way. Very glad. But just with being able to enjoy the new little one and all that, I decided to take this week off of study, but I'm going to hit it hard this next week. So I think, if I remember correctly, I'm up through Objective 2. I'm still working through Objective 2 on the JavaScript test. So excellent. Let's dig in here and I wanted to share a few things. First, I think some congratulations are due. Very, very due. So Alessandro Ronchi, I hope that's how I pronounce your name, and Damian Culotta, both of them in this certification group. Both of them were just named as 2020 Magento Masters. So if we all could do a round of applause, whatever, remotely, but outstanding work. Greatly appreciate the massive amount of investment into the Magento community that it takes to be able to earn such a incredible title for 2020. So very grateful for their investment. And both of them are in the Slack channel. So you'll see, especially Alessandro, he's in there. He's responding to questions. He's studying himself for a test. He's going to ace it. We'll just put that one out there. But it's really great to have this type of interaction here in our little subset of a community from the greater Magento community. So this is great. Yes, Italian proud. That's absolutely right. Okay. Now, I also want to give a shout out to 3 members of our community as well, of our certification here, little community. We're not segregating ourselves off, but we're all focused on this common goal of becoming certified. So 3 of you have passed the test. I think Kishan and Bhargav passed it, I think, at the Meet Magento in India opportunity there. Was it last night? And so my time yesterday. So they've passed the test. The Associate in Cloud and Nikola Lardev also passed the Associate Developer test. So we are seeing results already, and that couldn't make me more excited. I to be really honest, this makes me very excited about that. We're already seeing progress here. So this is good. So good job to all 3 of you as well for passing. As you do pass, feel free to let me know. I certainly want to give you a shout out in our bi-weekly meetings, but certainly congratulations all the way around. Last time we talked about don't check your email, and as I put this into practice, after I had talked, I found this really effective. it was just crazy because it was such a temptation for me to want to go check my email, to go check Slack, to get into, to see what's going on. But as I didn't do that, I had much, much better study success. And so that was something that personal and practical that I have put into practice, and I hope that it benefits you. And I think a lot of this comes back to, I was listening to a podcast recently, the Diary of a CEO by Stephen, I don't remember his last name, but he interviewed Nur Iwal who wrote the book Indistractable, and again, outstanding book. So, and that was one of his things, is being deliberate about when you check email, about these. It's okay to allow these distractions. You just need to have a set time to allow distractions. And that was some of the fundamentals of what he was talking about. So really eye-opening for me. Yes, this is great. All right. So don't check your email. I just wanted to review that from last week. But what I want to focus on, take some time today, is not necessarily a study technique, but it's something that I have found is particularly difficult in the Magento system. And it's actually one of those core features that for many people, we don't get into it very often. Unless you are working in an international situation where you do need multiple websites, multiple store views, for example, we really don't mess with this area of Magento that often. It's pretty much a just one website store view, and we call it a day. And so understanding how this works is really critical, because regardless of whether or not you have experience in this, Magento is going to expect you to know about it, because again, it's a core feature, and which I find is fascinating, because the competitors out there, Shopify and say BigCommerce, for example, is kind of the two big competitors. It's kind of a different field, software as a service versus on-prem, but they don't even have these features at least well baked in. I understand WooCommerce is also pretty well lagging in this area as well. So there's so this is a really powerful feature, and yet it's hard to understand. It's complex, and there's some really difficult test questions, I think, on just about every Magento test. And so having this understanding is really critical. So maybe the JavaScript would be exempt on this one, but I think that's actually about it. So I want to take a few minutes and look into this segment, particularly because I know for me, the tendency is to say, I don't know about this section. I think it sounds kind of difficult to get into, and so I'm not going to study it. But ultimately, we all know that's a failing recipe, because we are expected to know about it on the test, and the test doesn't change for our preferences and what we would like. The test is the test. So we want to be successful. We want to ensure success. So we're going to dig into this here a little bit today. So I'm going to try to cover it from a number of perspectives, from a developer perspective, as well as from a non-developer perspective too. So let's get into it. And feel free to ask questions here as we're going through this, because I think, I love the interaction, and we'll certainly also have a time for just any general questions here at the end of our meeting today. So in Magento, there is really, you might say, 4 scopes. We could add a 5th scope into this as well. And actually, for the sake of just information, we could put that up here at the very top. These 4 or 5 scopes. This top one would be default configuration. So that would be what is specified in XML. So that would be, for us developers, etc/config.xml. So anytime you create a system configuration in etc admin HTML system.xml, you can, so you create that, and then you can go into etc config.xml and specify a default value. For example, maybe you want to specify, maybe you set a value up for, and I'm just actually trying to think of a good example. Maybe it would be for a layout or a layout configuration that you have just added to the store configuration. And so you want to have it by default activated and set to this parameter. Well, that's where you would use your etc config.xml. So that's going to be the primary driver. it can be overridden at the global scope. So the global scope is what you see in store configuration when you when you go into this account. And actually, I probably should have opened up a sandbox on this. That would be interesting to do. Let me see if I can pull it up here real quick, so then I can give you a demonstration of exactly what we're talking about. So the global is when you first go into stores configuration. That's what you see. See if we can get logged in here. No, okay. So what would be? Okay, so that, not that one. Oh, I know what we can do. We'll just do this. Stores configuration. Okay. All right, so let's make sure this is looking good here. Oops, and I didn't have my my screen over there. Sorry about that. All right. Let's drag this down. All right, so here is, I'm actually in our SwiftDaughter website. So swiftdaughter.com runs Magento 2. But let's just jump back over here. So yeah, let's move this over here. Okay, so try again here. We have so we have our different scopes here: global, website, store, and store view. But what I have here in so this is our SwiftDaughter Magento admin. We have different selections like country set selections. And so you see this use system value. We have our different scopes right here. Default config is global. So at the global level, we can uncheck anything that is we would like, and that we're going to now specify this value ourselves. But if a value is already set in etc config XML, we don't need to, this checkbox says just use that value. So if we want to override it, we uncheck this checkbox, say, maybe the default country is Uruguay now. And now the default country is Uruguay when we save it. So we have the main scope here. Then we have the website scope. We have store and store view. So this is kind of the best way to get a preview of each one of these scopes. This default config would be global. Then we have website, store, and store view. So each one of these scopes is available for configuration of one way or another. Now, what's confusing is what is available in which scope, and one other important part here: when new scopes are necessary. What triggered my thinking on this is well, in two things. First, I've struggled with this a lot because just it can seem really muddy what's required at what each level. How do we work through this? But second, I had a phone call. Someone called me up yesterday, and they were curious about whether they needed multiple websites. And the answer was yes in this case. But ultimately, it highlighted something that is often on these tests, and that is when a new scope is necessary and what scope is necessary. So not only what features are available in each scope, which ultimately we could chalk up to memorization questions. And I don't think you're going to find questions like, at what scope can you set prices? You were not going to find questions like that. But what you are going to find is a scenario. Okay, this merchant needs to launch a store in this new region. They would like to set prices for that region. So what scopes are necessary to be created? Practical question. That's what we're going to be talking about here. And my goal is to help prepare you for what is this going to look like. So we have these actually five scopes. At the top here, we have I'm going to say default. That comes from etc config.xml. Then we have global, which overrides. And each one of these levels can override if the configuration is available. It can override the preceding level. So by the time we get down to store view, this can override values set in website. Or if there's no store view override, and it's only set in website, it will override the value set in global. Or if there's no website override, then the value in global will be present unless that's not going to override, unless there's no global value set, and then it's the default value will persist for this specific store configuration value. So it's kind of like CSS, if you will, for us developers. Each scope overrides the previous scope. I'm sure we all get that. But what is more important, though, now in this process of understanding is what is available at each different scope. So I wrote this out, and we're actually going to they have a table coming up here in just a minute. Really valuable table that I think will also help shed some light. But just at a high level, this is what I want you to remember. And I think this is going to help you significantly in your test taking. So global affects all settings. No matter what it is, pretty much a setting will be available globally. The one that I am aware of that is an exception to this would be table rates, the CSV upload and export. That is only available in the website scope. But otherwise, global, pretty much everything else is available in global. So website, this is the biggest area for configuration that you're probably going to find in Magento as far as a specific scope. There's feature switches. Do you want to, for example, in commerce, are you going to enable the shared catalog? Are you going to enable the whole B2B module in general? Those are pretty much per website. Shipping methods. Are you going to enable UPS or FedEx or DHL? That's configured at a website level. Pricing. In-store configuration, you can go and configure this, set which scope you want the prices to be uploaded in. So when you go into your catalog, you can then say, do you want the configuration uploaded in, or the prices uploaded in, say, US dollars or euros? This configuration found in catalog, let's see here, price, catalog price scope, can be set to global or website. So if it's set to website, then you can upload a unique product price per scope, per store. So say it's some products 15 US dollars, but in Europe it's say 20 euros. Whatever it is, however you want to do that, that would be this is how you would upload this type of information. One thing to keep in mind here is if you have currency conversion set up and enabled, and I'm probably not going to get too much into that at this moment, but if you have currency conversion enabled, that is in general currency setup, then you could end up via some confusion getting double conversion. So for example, you upload prices, you have this set to website, you upload prices in euros, but you think you upload them, well, in your spreadsheet they're set up as euros, you import them in, but maybe your base price is the currency, base currency is set to be US dollars. So US dollars then converted over to euros would mean a double euro conversion. So that is a potential problem that I've run into that you can run into with this type of conversion. So in other words, you want to make sure that you are uploading prices that match the scope, so website scope or a global, as well as the currency options. So we see currency setup options, base currency, which would be here, and the base currency is this. So that is something that is really important to keep in mind. See some questions coming in. All right, good. And only if attribute price also set to website. I'm not sure I'm fully following the context here, but yes, you want to make sure that that your base currency matches the currency in which you upload product prices in. Another thing along this line, base currency. Well, base versus not base. It's like, so for example, as us developers, we look in the sales order table. We're going to see a base grand total column and a grand total column. What's the difference? Well, the difference is this. So you see base here, that is the difference. So for example, base currency is the currency in which a product's price is uploaded. So if it's US dollars here, if it's euros, if it's rupees, whatever it is, that is the base currency. So what we need to do is, so base currency means this is the price that the product has been uploaded in and the price that the order is charged out in. So for example, if it's US dollars, the 15 US dollars, the product will be uploaded. The product will be purchased for 15 US dollars. That's what the card will be charged out as. Even if we see allowed currencies here, even if the customer sees this currency in euros, or the customer sees it in new shekels or pesos or rubles, whatever it is, they might see, so like, for example, like on a practice test, I can't remember how much, like, is it 1,300 rupees? I can't remember exactly, but like, was it 12 and a half US dollars and versus 1,300 Indian rupees. So customer thinks they're paying 1,300 Indian rupees, but in reality, when they are charging their card, it's actually charging it for 12 and a half US dollars. So the base currency is the currency in which the card is charged and the product's price is originally uploaded. Now, the reason for this is, I think, mostly reporting, because you need to have a standard currency in which you can obtain reports. For example, we've actually had this problem before on our SwiftOtter website with Google Analytics. There was a bug for a while where we tracked the e-commerce purchases in whatever the converted currency value was. So again, if it was, it should have been tracked as 12 and a half US dollars for whatever order this was, but in reality, it was coming back as 1,300. So it wasn't with the currency symbol, was not with it. That created a problem because you might have, say, 3 orders in a day or whatever, and the value it showed in Google Analytics was like €1,400 or $1,400, and that was because of the currency conversion rate that was coming back through. So it's very important for reporting to always use the base columns from the sales order table if you're creating reports. All right, so yes, Alessandro, thank you. You jumped ahead there. That's great. In Magento 2.3, the inventory has become much more flexible thanks to MSI. Let's take a look here. We have sources and stocks, and we're not going to get too deep into this, but I want to point out in stocks what happens and how this works. So in stocks, this is, again, our default Magento stock. We have sales channels, and we have sources. So a source is this base inventory location. So I have a fulfillment center in Seattle. I have a physical store in Kansas City. I have another physical store in Chicago or wherever. And so this is, we have our sources that we've configured, and then we have the sales channels. So do we want to assign, to map this source to this channel? Really, a stock is just a mapping tool. I have this sales channel, which would be technically websites, but also as Magento adds other sales channels, for example, like eBay or Amazon, those will also appear in this section, or those do appear in this section. So I want to maybe have any source shipped to this, fulfill orders for this specific website or this specific sales channel. Or we can have one source fulfill all orders for this sales channel. So that gives you really powerful flexibility in mapping where your fulfillment centers are to what channels they fulfill. Ultimately, you can use this to your benefit. For example, if we have a US website, and note that here that store views do not come into the picture here. So it's just websites. So if we have a US website and we have a Europe website, chances are those are going to be pretty well separate. Different prices, maybe different products, for example. But we would have, say, our US fulfillment center. We would have a stock for, say, US fulfillment. We would assign a US source, and we would assign our US stock. So all orders placed on our whatever .com website is, then those orders will be fulfilled by our US fulfillment center. However, we would then create another stock for European fulfillment, and that would have our European fulfillment center here as the source, and it would have the European channel as our website. So ultimately, it's very, very powerful for this type of configuration. Okay. Hopefully that was Okay. Sunil, good question. So inventory store is good idea, but what about the shipping rate? So I have not actually looked into this, but my understanding is that actually I shouldn't even talk about that because I have not looked into that. That's a very good question. And actually, I don't know what test you're going for. If you're going for a developer test, that would be a great, well, actually any one of those. That's a great and actually very easy question to answer. So if you find the answer to that, let me know, post it on the channel. I would be happy to know because that's a fantastic question and I would love to know that for myself. So great question. All right, so we've looked at currency. We know the difference between base currency and the converted currency. We've looked at inventory. We've looked at stock. There's a few other aspects that this works with. This affects on the in the scopes here. So let's continue looking at our hierarchy here, and then we're going to delve into some more specific areas. Stores. What value does stores bring? And honestly, it's kind of funny. I think in a lot of ways, this one could be eliminated. But I think this Magento architecture has been built on this for a long time, and I don't really picture it going away anytime soon. Okay, so store is the root category. Literally, that is the one of the main and only values that the store scope brings. Okay, that's great. Alessandro answered that. So the source is not chosen during checkout. So shipping rates can't be determined based on source. That's very interesting, and it makes a lot of sense. Although it seems like it should be based off of like live rating. It seems like it just should be based off of the source, but that sounds like a very plausible answer. So root category. So basically, if a merchant needs separate category structures, but they don't necessarily need to separate to make products not available. So for example, at the website, back up at the website level, we can enable or disable a product. We can assign a product to different websites. So we can have it enabled, but only assigned to website A, but not website B. So if a web product is not assigned to a website, you get a 404. It's not available, not visible. But at the store level, you can use categories to say, hey, I want this kind of structure. Let's say I have a website that sells bags, and I want to sell like handbags and backpacks and laptop bags and that sort of thing on this one website. Actually on this one domain, I need to try to be careful with that. It's domain, but then we have another domain that has like a different structure of, say, luxury handbags and cheap handbags and whatever else. So we might not need a separate website if they're okay with product URLs being available on different websites or on different domains. So we might just need a root category change. Different category, different browsing structure. So again, the category can affect the upper menu navigation. And so if we have a different root category, it's a different way to browse the website. It's also the store switcher as well. So this root category is specified in let me show you. In stores, all stores, go into your main website store, and you'll see the root category here. That is literally where you specify this. And that is about the only configuration that is available at the store scope. So the final one here is the store view. Website is pretty much feature switches, major configuration changes. The store view literally is translations, and it's designed for different locales. So we might have a French store view. We would have a English store view. We would have a Dutch store view. All these different other store views. So those are pretty much for translations. So we would have, obviously the French locale set in France for the French store view. So that would, for example, come into stores configuration. Let's see here. And then we have our locale options down here. We can specify, what locale it is. So that's where we would change this type of a value. Okay, so Sunil has another question. A little bit concerned about this store root category. It should be the same we do for products. I'm not exactly following you because ultimately products can be assigned to any number of categories, which means they can be assigned to completely different category structures. So, but a product to be visible on a website, so like the URL is active, does not necessarily mean that it has to be assigned to a category. So a product can be assigned to no categories in a given scope, but it can still be browsable. Okay, so I want to touch on something that's also quite confusing. In the admin panel, everything is named differently than the Magento core code. So websites are the same, but we have store versus store group and store view versus store, and that's confusing. But it is what it is. So just keep that in mind. Solution specialist test I know uses this nomenclature. I cannot remember. I think the other developer test uses this nomenclature. So let me move myself out of the way here for this one. There we go. All right, so you can see the difference there. Okay, let's keep on here. This is great. All right, so here's that chart I told you about. This is really valuable because there is not aware of anything out there like this. And actually in the Solution Specialist prep course, I have a much even more detailed version of this. So again, just actually I need to, I keep forgetting that checkbox. I can put a checkbox now in here. So for product inventory, that is global or website. And that is specifically because of MSI. Price is available in global or website. By default, it is global. Most product attributes are, well, they're selectable. So if the Magento created ones, they're not selectable. When you create a new one, you can select in any one of these three scopes. Products are edited in global, website, or store view. You cannot edit values in the store scope. One thing to note there, and I know this can get a little bit deep, but maybe if you want to rewatch some of this section, but when editing a product, you actually technically are only editing two scopes. You see the drop-down menu, there are only two scopes available, global and store view. So when you are in a product, and I'll show you here, it's the same thing as in a product. You can see this little box underneath there, website or store view. That's the scope in which it is editable. So you can, as you are working through this, if on a product you see a website scope, remember that you can change store views and that value for the website will stay the same. And it can be really confusing. For example, price. If you think you drop down to the store view to change the price, change it to $15 US, change a different store view, and you see that price actually changed as well, or stayed $15 as you change store views. That's because you edited it in that attribute is editable in the website scope. So, so that can be a definite point of confusion there. So products are only editable in global and store view, but the attributes that you create for those products are global, website, or store view. So the default root category is the store. Tiered pricing filter is website. So as you're updating or changing price, creating tiered prices for a product, that is per website. And then ultimately per store, the stores then can convert this currency. So if you have your website, your base currency set to US dollars, it'll be converted out to say euros at the store view level. Payment methods, global or website, as well as shipping methods. Those are very similar in idea. All right, so product attributes. This one is interesting because, again, you have a lot of configuration, a lot of power that's available to you. So global ones would be like the SKU. Of course, that's not going to change per scope. It's going to be, it's fixed. It is as it is there. Website, though, would be the price as well as the status. You can enable or disable a product per website scope. But remember, you have to jump past the website scope down to the store view scope in order to change this. And that's where it's confusing because you think you're changing the status in a store view, but really you're changing it in the website. So that that jump around is what's confusing in on editing products. And then finally, the store view is the values that need to be translated. So this would be, I want to translate this into Dutch, or I want to translate this into German or whatever, this product name. And so that's where the store view comes in handy. One thing, well, I think I have a question here that I need to answer. All right, so assuming I have a Magento installation with multiple websites and each website should have the same store views, how can I achieve that? So like the store view codes are unique. So for example, let's say you have, I think just when I'm gathering here, you would have two websites. So a website that sells, say, hardware, and another website that sells, well, I say like hardware, say home improvement goods, and another website that sells, I don't know, electronics. And each in those websites, you would have a store view for Europe. You would have a store view for France, Netherlands, and Italy. So you'd have in each one of those. The problem is that there is no way to keep those synchronized, and that's where you want to use websites judiciously. You want to minimize that. In fact, I know on the solution special, and I think on some of the other tests as well, there's some questions about minimizing the number of scopes, just because of that very issue that you're bringing up, as long as I'm understanding you correctly. Yes, and I think I am. So you came back and you said, yes, but sometimes I need two websites with different prices and two store views for each language. Exactly. And so if you are able to figure out ways to combine them, which prices is kind of the deal breaker there. You're not really able to change prices on a per website. And the reason is, if you look in the, one of those reasons is if you look at the indexing tables, you will see that one of those columns is website ID. Website ID, customer group ID, as well as tax class ID, and then you have the price column. So because of that, Magento is completely designed around price off on a website level. So that's why the cart price rules and the catalog price rules all apply to a website and not to a store view. So unfortunately, that's that kind of situation you are ultimately stuck, because price is the deal breaker. If you were able to use just currency conversion, so you have, like you're saying, English and German, so you have US dollars and maybe euros, yeah, and you're converting US dollars into euros or vice versa, you're okay. You're good. You don't need any other, you wouldn't need to have two separate websites, but most of the time people don't want to just do currency conversion. They want to have unique specific prices for Europe versus United States, because there's different costs. There's much different aspects of running a business in Europe versus the United States. So unfortunately, in that case, you kind of end up being stuck. All right. So ultimately, this all comes back to, how do I become proficient at this? Because again, this is on pretty much every single Magento test. I think there's a little bit on cloud. There is, I think, very little, if I remember correctly, on JavaScript. But every other test, there is some aspect of this on there. So what I'm going to suggest for each one of you is make sure you have a sandbox, your learning environment configured with multiple websites and store views. Now, here's the deal. That's a pain. It's a absolute pain. Whoops, see, dragged the wrong window. It's an absolute pain to do this. However, it's really, really important. So if you're doing the solution specialist, this is exceptionally important. Configuring multiple websites and store views. This is going to force you to get into, for example, the Nginx or Apache configuration locally on your system. You're going to be able to, you're going to have to, so you create the stores in there, then you have to go into Apache or Nginx, create the new URL path, so the listener for the URL path, to set the run code and the scope for those specific paths, or for those new URLs. You'll have to create those scopes in Magento. There is some legwork that needs to be done on this. And I know, for example, in the prep course, I don't know how many of you are in that, but I have several scopes that are pre-configured on the web server side, and they just have to be created in the sandbox themselves. So this is really, really important. And I know it's a pain. I know it's a pain, but for your sake, and that's why I realize this is such an important thing to talk about, because I had something else I was thinking about talking about, but I realized, this is probably the most important thing as you are continuing to study and work on this, simply because of how this stuff is hammered on the test. And literally, especially in the solution specials, it is hammered. And I don't want you to fail on this very point. So as such, the goal is to try to get a practical perspective on how this works. I've tried to share practical information thus far. Feel free to rewatch this. That's the nice thing about YouTube. You can rewatch it as many times as you want. So I threw together some scenarios that I think will be really helpful for you in trying to understand how this works. Because ultimately you want to get this picture of not necessarily, okay, this feature is available to be configured in this scope. No, that's not what we're going for. What we are going for is this is how we configure this, or this is when we need to create a new scope, or this is how this scope affects this specific feature. So let's work through a couple of these here. I have some non-developer ones. I have some developer ones. Ultimately, if you are a developer, all of this will be valuable. If you're not a developer, these last few will not be as helpful for you. So first, configure the multiple websites with a base currency for each. How does this affect product prices? Go place orders. If you're a developer, go place orders. Check and see how the values in the sales order table are. You can even dig in, get into the currency conversion aspect of this to see how, again, breakpoints. Yeah, you probably have heard me talk about that probably a little too much, but breakpoints, really important. Step through this process of how do these prices get converted? How do they get saved? All those different aspects. So configure this website with a different base currency for each, upload product prices for them, understand how this process works through, and make sure you become really familiar with it. Again, it's not necessarily ideal picture of fun, but just do it. Optimize product attributes for multiple languages. And this is really an interesting feature, and I think it's something that we can actually miss, is that Magento allows us to set in like when we're creating a attribute, a multi-select or a select attribute, Magento allows us to use columns. So we have the US column. We would have the French column, a German column, a column for every store view. So instead of having to say we have these attribute values, and we would then have one list of attribute values for US, and then below that another list for French and another list for Dutch. No, actually, we can just translate those values, which makes product administration a lot easier. Unfortunately, not everybody uses that. So optimizing this is really critical. So understanding how these product attributes work. If you're a developer, get into the database. Look at the EAV attribute option table, if I remember correctly. Understand how these values work together. Deploy languages to store views, especially if you're a front-end developer. This is really important because there are a couple of steps that are required to make this a reality. So work through that process. Use the ship to applicable country selection to unify store views and countries. So there may be some questions on the test about is there a way to limit shipping methods by store view? And there is a way, more or less, not 100%, but there's a more or less way to do this out of the box. And that is with a use ship to applicable countries. Also, that's available in payment methods as well. So you can ultimately configure some of this to say restrict based off a store view your shipping location. The caveat is that this pretty much only works if you have domains that are localized per language. So you would have like a swiftauto.com, swiftauto.fr, swiftauto.de, swiftauto.co.uk. And it's still not perfect past that, I'll be frank there, but it gets you probably about 75 to 85% of the way there. And this is important to know how to do this because, again, just as we were talking about with Steven there, it's a pain to have multiple websites. The phone call I got yesterday, that was their big complaint. It's a pain to do this, but I would venture to say it's still a lot easier to do this than, how do I say this? Than to have multiple Magento installations. So that's still good. The other aspect of this is that depending on, and there might be a Magento bug around this, but if with imports or poorly programmed like connectors, all of these attribute values might get overridden at the store view scope. So understanding, okay, how did these values map together, and maybe how can I clean some of these values up, values that are the same, how can I clean those out, is also another important aspect of understanding how these scopes work. All right, so now let's jump into the code. How do you access a value from a given scope? When you are by default calling a scope, in the scope configure interface, it's the get value method. What scope does that by default call? And it's not always what you think it is. So work through that. How do you emulate a given scope or area? So front end versus back end, or front end versus admin HTML, the different scopes in those. How do you emulate those? And then finally, how would you predefine? I already kind of gave you the hint on that one in etcconfig.xml. How would you predefine this configuration value in XML, but for a given scope? So you're working on a merchant's website. You don't feel like having to make sure that you've gotten into the code and configured this value. So you literally just throw this in etcconfig.xml, but for this specific store view. To me, that's pretty viable. It works. So how do you do that? Well, there is a way to do that. And actually, it's kind of funny. It's not overly well documented. So I think it's a great thing to jump into there. So that's what I wanted to talk about as far as, helping you all achieve certification success. So some weeks we're going to talk about tips and suggestions and that sort of thing. But this week I wanted to talk about this kind of dark, murky area because can be just that. And I want to see each one of you successful. So with that, feel free to rewatch this section. It was kind of a lot to talk about here. And to be frank, we could probably spend another hour talking about it. But a little more positive note, had somebody send me this picture this morning, and it was really awesome. I loved it because they're in Vietnam studying on the beach. Looks like I look outside. I have my window open this morning. It's actually sunny. You can see the shadow back there, but it's nice and cold here in the great state of Kansas. And I don't know. What was the temperature here this morning? It is. I had internet off there. 34, so about 0 here in Kansas. So it's cold, so it was really nice. It's like, wow, they're studying in a wonderful place. So what I thought is, hey, if you ever feel like it, if you're studying somewhere great, even you're studying here at home, whatever, I'm studying here hashtag and post a photo, whatever study guide you're working on or just project or whatever it is, just feel free to do that. That'll be really fun to see the progress, see where everybody's studying. I'll definitely send a picture of myself studying. Upload that here. Actually, I'm going to Orlando here in a couple weeks, and so I'll probably have to post a photo of me studying there. So either way, join in on that. Share a photo of your environment, and definitely kudos to this person studying on their vacation. So they take their career, they take the certification stuff really seriously. So with that, question and answer. Is there anything that we can talk about? Anything maybe I could answer a question or two? Some questions about the whole certification stuff, or I guess we could dig into some technical stuff, whatever works. I want to remind you of the Today I Studied channel in the group in Slack. It's a great way, kind of accountability, great way to post and say what you've been working on. So again, I've said I took a little break from it this week, but I'm going to be jumping in next week, posting my Today I Studied. And so we'd be looking forward to getting into that. So any questions that we can talk about, and I appreciate this. This has been great interaction so far. But definitely if there's other things that we could talk about, I have a few minutes here left and available today for this. And before also we quit, if you have found this helpful, I'm always interested if you click the like button on this, because that that's helpful. And I'm not one to push this at all, but I always appreciate if you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then also you click the little bell icon that helps you be notified about future videos, live streams that are coming out, because we still have a few more in this certification challenge. So any questions that I can answer, we can talk about here in the last few minutes. Okay. Hassan. All right. So, Bhargav, he's on. I think I saw you on earlier, but it was great because Bhargav is one of our certification winners. As of this week, he is now cloud certified. I think he has a number of other certifications too. So feel free to drop those certifications in the comments. I'd be always interested to see that, but definitely one of our heroes thus far. And I look at all these other names here in this the chat comments, and I look forward to seeing every one of your names as another hero in this certification challenge. All right, so let's answer Hassan's question. Hassan, all right, so how many months do I need to prepare for the Associate Developer certification? I have 2 years of Magento 2 experience. Excellent question. Thank you. So this is just my suggestion. Your mileage may vary, but I would suggest, how many objectives are there? And I would suggest taking a week or two per objective. So if you feel like you are weak in an area, and you have to be really honest with yourselves. And this is and I've alluded to this a number of times. This is a challenge for me. My temptation is to look at objectives like, I don't want to dig into that. That's gonna be too tough. You have to check that at the door, because ultimately that's a marker of failure right there. I've had to work on that myself. So I get in there and I have to say, okay, I don't feel like studying UI components at all, but I'm going to study them. And to be frank, they have become much easier to work with. They're still a pain. For example, I just have to say this. We have a customer who's using, a number of customers using this. Actually, I think it's actually just one, using this particular one-step checkout. It is such a pain, absolute pain, because every new module that we install that affects the checkout, it doesn't work. So literally we have to get in there and rewire this up. It's a disastrous pain. And this checkout's cost them a lot of money. But whatever. So, but this experience in the UI components, that as I have over the years worked in this or tried to learn and study them, it's now really helped. It's still, you hear me saying it's not fun. It's still a pain, but it's made it a lot easier. All right. So, I would say, 1 to 2 months, I would say 1 to 2 weeks per objective. Just get in there, study it. So if you find something really hard, take a little extra time on it. If you find this stuff really easy, take a little less time. That said, since you do have 2 years of experience with Magento 2, the other thing you can do is take a practice test and see where you fall on this score. If you get, say, 70s to 80s, you're probably just about ready to take the test. You could always work through the study guide, just try to briefly hit all the subjects, all the topics, but you might not even need a month of study. If you if you get a really low score, you could have 2 years of experience, but I've also seen in a lot of cases where developers are pretty well siloed and they only work on this one specific area. So you'd probably get 100% of all of answers in that specific area, the topics on questions on that topic. But there's a whole bunch of other areas in Magento, and the associate developer expects you to understand all these areas. So take the practice test first if you want to. Depending on how you do, review the study guides. Make sure you bone up on those areas that you see you're really weak in the practice test, and you should be ready to take the test. All right. So question about no question, suggestion. All right, let's read this here. Michelle, I think it can be interesting if during this YouTube session you can show us a pair of possible test questions about the topic we just have discussed. Good question. So that would be like the scopes. So I will write that down. We will talk about this next meeting. So make sure you're back here, because we're going to go through some test questions, and we're going to break them down and talk about how this works. So yes, great suggestion, great idea. Let's do it next meeting. Professional developer certified and front-end certified. Wow, good job. And thinking about give the JavaScript exam. How many years of experience needed for this? Well, I can't say for sure. Myself, I am definitely not I'm not a front-end developer, but I've decided I got to do this JavaScript developer test. So you probably have enough experience as it is. You'll just want to get in there and do some study. Unless you're working with Knockout every day, you probably want to get in there and do some study. So I'm taking a measured approach on this. So I'm going to study for about 3 months on this, 15 minutes to half an hour every day. So not a huge amount of time every day, but that's what I can take out of my schedule in order to invest in that way. What is the best study guide for the same? Well, I probably am the wrong person to ask there. Of course, I would always recommend our JavaScript developer study guide, which I am working through myself. And it's been very good. So Magento, of course, that's based off of the Magento U study guide, which is free. Ours is not. But, it's up to you whether you want to, just depending on the value that you see. Ours obviously has a lot of information filled out about it, but, the Magento U study guide doesn't. But, it's free. So it's a matter of a cost comparison. What is it worth to you? What do you want to do? Nikola was wondering if it's better to go for front end or to continue with professional developer exam. All right. So I think if I remember correctly, you just passed the associate developer test. I'm going to suggest you go ahead for the professional developer. You're already on that line of thinking. I don't remember your score. I don't remember if you shared that with me. Maybe did you? I think you did. If I remember correctly, you might have aced it. I think just go shoot for that professional developer. You're already there. It's covering the same topics. It's just a lot deeper. So I think you're going to do really well at that. So just study, work through that process, and go for that professional developer. That's what I would suggest. Sergi, I missed your question. Magento 2 Solutions Specialist includes sales channels, and Magento User Guides is a big topic. Okay, so in the Solution Specialist exam, there are some questions about MSI. If you do the math, so when I say the math, this is just a little hint across all channels, across all tests. You can see that every test has 60 questions. You can then go into the Magento U study guide. I think ours has that as well, but it'll say what percentage of the test that this covers. So you can say, okay, if there's like 23%, you do 60 times 23%, and you'll see, okay, this is how many questions. And then ultimately you can break it down per sub-objective point. So 1.1 or 1.2 or 1.6. And you can say, okay, so if there's 6 in there, 23%, that would be 20 questions. So it's 20 divided by 6, roughly 3 questions per each one of those. No, 60, that's actually a bit less than that. So 2 questions, let's just say roughly per sub-objective point, like on the Solution Specialist, objective 1. And that's just going off memory there. So as such, there's not going to be that many questions about it. So they could be the hardest questions you've ever known. But at the other time, we also know that there's only going to be, 3 questions about MSI. I think there's another objective point on there that does cover MSI. So it probably going to be like 3 or 4 questions, if I remember correctly. So ultimately, you can say, well, how well is it worth taking a whole bunch of extra time on this? It's up to you to make that decision. The problem is you add up enough of those and that leads to failure. So ultimately, I would suggest still getting in there and studying that sales channels, even though it might be barely covered on the test overall. Awesome. All right. Well, I show it is 10 o'clock, my time, 9:59 to be exact. This has been outstanding. Thank you all for joining. I look forward to next week. We're going to dive into practice tests and talk about how to take those, how to be effective at that. We're going to get into some sample questions. So I look forward